I wanted to have a small uh, eh, talk about whether you think it's possible to recover from stuttering. And then, of course, if you think it is possible, then you have to define what recovery from stuttering means.
Okay. Right. Well, okay. I'll start then, shall I? What I think.
You
Uh,
you ought to introduce your own self.
okay. Are we being recorded?
Okay.
Super. All right. Hi, I'm Paul Brocklehurst, and I'm a person who stutters, and a stuttering researcher, or maybe an ex-stuttering researcher. I'm not quite sure if you ever become an ex-stuttering researcher. And I live in France at the moment. And as I was just saying to Gunnars, I've been spending the last couple of years writing a book, an autobiography, in which, as it happens, some of the discussion is about whether recovery from stuttering is possible. So it is a topic that I've thought about. Is there anything else I should say there before we get on? Or
I should introduce myself, I guess, also, because I don't know if I'll be able to put the titles on it. I'm Gunnar Neiders. I have a PhD in psychology, and my current focus is on helping people who stutter. You know, it doesn't matter whether I'm getting any credit or money. It's just no es importa, as they say in Spanish. And I hear, Paul, you're also of the feeling is that it's not about money or fame.
that's right, yes. So the work that I've been doing with people who stutter, I decided in the end not to charge for it. I find it's better to try to keep myself alive in other ways. And so, yeah, it's like that.
Yeah. So, Paul, is
Yeah,
it all right if I ask a couple of things and you answer a couple of things? So,
sure.
but you can also ask of me, of course.
Yeah.
What do you think recovery from stuttering means?
Okay, well, uh, to answer that question, I think, first of all, I think one needs to have a clear idea or a clear definition of what one means by stuttering. Um, and that may seem obvious, but it's actually not as obvious as it may seem, because I'm under the impression that different people have different ideas about what stuttering implies or what stuttering involves. But if you could imagine that there are symptoms of stuttering, but there's also what you might call a disorder. There's a stuttering disorder. And by stuttering disorder, I mean that those symptoms that one produces disrupt one's life and cause problems make it difficult for you to thrive in everyday life. Now, recovery from stuttering makes most sense to me if one is talking about recovery from stuttering disorder. And what that means is that if one can reach a point where maybe you still produce some symptoms, repetitions, prolongations, blocks, but if those symptoms no longer cause a problem in your life, then that to me is probably the best way to consider recovery.
You're exactly in tune with me. Is that I consider stuttering is not that you have some disfluencies, but it is when it has an impact on you living life to the fullest. And
Yeah.
the thing is whether you're obsessing about stuttering and spending all of your time thinking about it, whether you have strong negative emotions about it, or whether you have unhelpful beliefs, irrational ones that stop you from taking calculated risks and pursuing the job of your choice, or the romantic partner of your choice, or the friend of friends of your choice.
Yeah, so I would see it in the same way. So if one can get to the point where one is completely at peace with how one is in relation to the symptoms of stuttering that one produces, and that's not just the overt symptoms, but the covert symptoms as well, then I would consider that from a functional perspective, at any rate, one has recovered. It's a little bit more complicated than that, because different people stutter, or different people produce symptoms to different degrees. And there's a big question mark in my mind. This is something I really wish I knew the answer to. But a question for me, right since my childhood, this question has been there, is, well, how can I know if I have reached my fullest capacity to speak optimally or to communicate optimally? It may be that some of us have got some underlying speech and language impairment or disorder that underlies the stuttering, so that even if the stuttering itself was not a problem, that there may still be some other thing there that makes it difficult to communicate.
In that way, I have it easier. I'm by erstwhile profession and engineer. I'm pragmatic in that it really does not matter whether I achieve any state of perfection. It's just that if I think I'm functioning optimally or suboptimally, when I can hold down any job I choose to, or pursue any individual I want to, even if I don't always achieve my goals, it doesn't matter. I'm one of those individuals who's against perfection in anything.
Well, me too. Or I've become like that as I've grown older, and perfectionism and the relationship between perfectionism and stuttering has been an interest of mine for quite some time. I've got a paper published on that, that because it was a topic also of my PhD research. Where can one go with that? I think the issue is that there are some people that I've come across in the stuttering world who produce quite severe symptoms of stuttering. And so what that means is that communication is quite difficult for them still. And occasionally these people, I've heard these people say that, well, that they're happy with their stuttering, and they wouldn't want to change it, maybe even if they could. And that's something that I'm not so certain when I see this scenario, because I mean, there was a time also in my own life when I used to stutter very severely, and just from a simple practical perspective, I used to find that if it used to take me too long to say things,
Yeah.
that other people would get frustrated with me and whatever.
My answer to that is if an individual has a very severe stutter and he says he's all right with it, he's full of shit. That is, I think that even though for some of the very severe stutters, and I was a rather severe stutterer, but maybe not the most severe. I think that it may take some effort and skill to manage their speech, but it is possible. If a ballerina can dance on her toes, it is possible for an individual who has some natural disfluencies to become smooth in their talking. The way I approach it is by Wendell Johnson, who was a general semanticist and a stuttering therapy at the University of Iowa. He invented the easy Iowa bounces, and that is off the bat. I teach my clients is that you can do you use easy repetitions like these, and they don't influence the communication as much, and you can in time prevent or preempt any block that you can hear coming on with any easy bounce. And
Right.
it tends to melt away.
Okay, so let me see if I've got you right there. What you're implying, or what I think you're implying, is that if a person really has got to the point where they are happy with their stutter, then their stutter will not be severe. It will be mild.
But I think that there's also, at the start, you have to use some technique at times to uh, blast the log jam of hard, severe stuttering. And
Sure.
you can either use Van Riper's presets and pullouts and all of that, or you can use easy onsets. But I prefer just to use the easy repetitions. That is.
Yeah. So the way I understand that, and I think I probably agree with you here, is that if you think of this in terms of secondary symptoms and primary symptoms, we have to work on our secondary symptoms and really make those secondary symptoms as minimum as possible. The primary symptom is another matter, but the secondary symptoms, I always feel that people have got a degree of control if they're aware enough of what they're doing. And so techniques that are taught, for example, the bounce that you mentioned, or the Van Riper techniques, things like that, I think that those form a very good starting point. And through using techniques of that kind, one can at least make one's stuttering, one can reduce it to its core at the very least, that it becomes no longer a matter of struggle and fighting, which it may have been previously.
Yeah, I use almost identical terms. I call it forced struggling speech.
Yeah. So
there's easy repetitions, screw it. It doesn't it doesn't bother me. I can go into any speech situation, and as I demonstrated on this tape, is I can easily repeat sounds, and it doesn't bother me whatsoever.
okay, so in a way, that's a bit like reversing the stutter back to what it may have been like in the beginning, before all of the secondary symptoms developed.
You just took phrase out of my paper. That's the exact phrase I use. It was what we had before we started to stutter.
Yeah.
It just, and the issue is that part of it, I think with time disappears. If you have, on one hand, you have good attitude about your speech, and on the other hand, you're willing to experiment and desensitize yourself. Now, how would you define desensitization?
Okay. Well, usually the symptoms we produce also provoke some sort of emotional reactions in us. And to varying, we're aware of those reactions to varying extents. And those reactions can be disruptive to varying extents too. Now, I always get a little bit mixed up here because one can sort of differentiate maybe between identification of what those reactions are and then desensitization. But actually the identification of them is a part of the desensitization process, really, I think. So first, I think it's a matter of being able to observe ourselves while we're going through this process of stuttering, to see what reactions are happening inside us, and then to learn to be okay with those reactions, and to learn not to automatically try to use force to change them, not to automatically evaluate them in negative ways, but I think simply to observe and to be aware. And hopefully doing that, going through that process, one's emotional reactions will become less extreme and less of a problem.
Now, we in rational emotive behavior therapy say that it is not the activating event on the outside, but the evaluating belief about the activating event that causes our emotions.
Okay.
The damn thing is to change your evaluation.
Sure.
To evaluating belief. And just as soon as you're stopping to evaluate some undesirable thing, as maybe you really don't want to have even a small disfluency, but if you only think of it as no big deal. If you don't have a belief that somehow stuttering makes you a child of a lesser God, and that it impedes you from going after what you want, if it's only a small one, then it's no big deal. And that is how I really approach all of my stuttering therapy, is by helping the individuals not believe in utter bullshit, like those people who don't stutter are better than those who do stutter.
Okay. So underlying that approach, there's a presumption that it's our understandings that are the basis of our emotional responses, and if the understanding is not a useful or not a helpful understanding, then it's going to produce emotional responses that get in the way, that are not helpful.
Yeah, I use, again, we're independently have come up with the same terms like unhelpful beliefs. That is, if your belief is not based on empirical evidence, logic, or whether it is useful to you or not, then it's unhelpful.
Okay.
But yes.
So I have a question here, because obviously our beliefs are not formed in complete isolation from the other people around us. We tend to assimilate the beliefs of the society in which we live, the beliefs of our parents, the beliefs of the people that we come into contact with.
Yeah.
And so in trying to change our unhelpful beliefs, is it not possible that that can cause issues with the people around us, or could in some way, maybe on a temporary basis at least, might cause reactions in the people that we see in our everyday lives?
You're right. That is why REBT is based on Stoicism.
Okay.
That is, you have to be able to be disapproved of.
Right.
Toughen yourself. You can't just say, hey, doesn't matter. It might matter, but sometimes you can teach yourself the stoical thinking is that I can stand being disapproved of. I don't have to be accepted by everybody in this world, and even by most significant individuals. Sometimes you get in a situation where somebody who's very important to you, or who you raised to be of high importance, is an individual whom you have to be able to understand is that they will not be your greatest fan in the world.
Okay. But in order to be stoic, and in order to be okay about not being approved of maybe by some people, one has to already have a very solid sense of self-esteem, I think. Is that not true?
That is, self-esteem is really a bullshit term also. Self-esteem means is that I hold myself of value because I can do something well.
Well, that's not a solid sense. That's a false sense of self-esteem, is it not?
That is, the accurate term is unconditional self-acceptance.
Okay. So yes, I mean, that's what I was really talking about. Yes, one has to already have unconditional self-acceptance in order to be stoic. Yes.
Well, but it is, Stoics at a school, they met on a porch in Athens and they talked themselves into that. And so in irrational emotive behavior therapy, the psychologist helps you to unconditionally accept yourself. And why shouldn't you unconditionally accept yourself? Because you're such a complex individual. There's so many characteristics you have. So you can't compare two individuals and say, you're acceptable, you're not.
So all of this is the groundwork that one has to cover, I would imagine, before even starting to work on the stutter.
Yes. you may, you're starting to understand what my second book on stuttering therapy is going to be like, is that you got to do this. You got to
Okay.
really, you got to understand is, if you compare two people,
Mm.
can you say that one person is better than somebody else?
Mm. Mm. Okay. So, these are the sort of things that you would talk about with your clients right at the beginning, I presume. Is that
Well, you
after a case history?
yes, you had a good start. Is that sometimes it takes some time to understand a person in order to convince him or her that they can unconditionally accept themselves. And that is where your case study is of so much value, is that you got to understand yourself, who you are, and
Mm.
then you were able to evolve your beliefs.
Okay, a question for you here. Do you think everybody has that capacity within them?
Well, I haven't yet talked with everybody.
Okay. uh,
Maybe there are some. No, the real thing is that the real uh, thing that I find is that it's often on so hard to get to uh, communicate with an individual in the terms that they understand. That is
mm,
their story. You don't you don't say you're going to think the way Stoics thought in the second century BC, or that Marcus Aurelius or Seneca or Epictetus wrote in their journals. You've got to understand where they are.
mm, mm,
And and that is the art.
mm.
It's an art to be able to make an individual think that you're helping them and that you're not tearing down their identity.
Mm. Except if it's a false identity, it maybe has to be torn down. Yeah.
Well, you're right again, as usually, Paul, is that if if they have built an identity on some things that are not evidence based or are illogical or do not help them, you've got to say, okay, can you substitute this for that, and become more uh, in tune with the universe?
Okay. Um, I mean, this is very close to the approach that I guess I've followed for quite a long time, and I still do follow it to quite a large extent. Um, One of the things that has changed with me in the last few years, so relatively recently, and this has been very much as a result of seeing other people who stutter and talking with a lot of them, but not only with people who stutter, but with a variety of different issues, is a lot of people that I've met, when you start to talk about things that are very emotive to them, get so upset that their capacity to look at evidence in the way that you've been talking, and their capacity to be detached and rational seems to fall apart at those moments of time. And having had many experiences of trying to talk to people and finding that they're getting upset, it somewhat made me question how far one can go with this approach. I think from what you say, it sounds like a very similar approach to one that I've looked at myself. Do you feel it's enough? Or do you feel with people like that, maybe, for example, people who are traumatized, that it may be necessary to also look at some other approaches that are not so rational and maybe do not require them straight away, at any rate, to use their conscious powers of judgment and intellect?
You you said it all by using the term straight away. What I look at it as, you have to do some work to prepare them.
Hmm.
First of all, there is no wrong emotion. Okay. You feel it. It is there. And to say this emotion is irrational or stuff as that is, it's not helpful. Now, if you say is, maybe, why don't we examine where did this emotion come from?
Hmm.
Then you might be able to have the client or the person who's being coached attempt to think about it. You know, there is, where did I get the emotion that there is with in the United States at this time, is that there's some racist emotions. There is, some people just think that one race is better than another race, and they really believe it. Okay.
Hmm.
So you have to help them to understand, hey, maybe it was just taught to you without you cooperating with it. Now, what are some of the other ways of thinking about it? And there is a movement in psychology before, that is where they insert something ahead, where you first accept who they are totally, and I do, and then you can maybe unwind them and show them that there are things that sometimes are not most helpful in them getting along in this universe. And then there's a choice. You can always say, all right, you choose to do certain things and feel in a certain way. It is totally all right. That is, the consequences may not be what you want, but you have a right to be whoever you are and think however you want to think.
Okay. I have a question, just going back a little bit for something that you just said regarding emotions. Now, I'm not quite sure if I quite got this right, but I think you were saying that there are no right or wrong emotions. There are no good or bad emotions. And if I understand what you were getting at, you were probably trying to pick apart the emotion from the value judgments that we make about the emotions. Is that right? Or
Well, if you think in absolutistic standards, there's the way I divide emotions are those that are healthy and those that are unhealthy.
right? Okay.
How would you define an unhealthy emotion?
Uh, well, I guess I would imagine if an emotion causes problems for me or for other people around me more than it causes benefit. So I would see it a bit like a profit and loss thing. If the overall effect of it is that it brings benefit to me and to others more than it brings detriment, then it's a useful emotion. In my experience, it's often not so much a question of what emotion, but it's often a question of how strong the emotion is. So if one thinks of different emotions, an emotion such as anger can have positive or negative consequences. If it becomes very strong, more often the consequences are negative to oneself and also to other people. But one could say the same of practically any emotion, actually. I mean, my own personal belief is that these emotions have evolved, and the fact that they exist at all means that they're probably fundamentally okay for us. It's just that when they become overly strong, or we get stuck in a particular emotion and unable to move on from it, that it's more likely to become a problem.
Yeah, that is what we teach in our REBT is that probably at an evolutionary stage, most of our emotions were of value. There was time where being anxious at the smallest noise or smallest discord, it was survival, you know.
Hmm.
And you were totally in the sandbox which I play in, and that is one pile we call unhealthy emotions, other pile healthy emotions. So for any, and the difference is the degree, the intensity, the severity, the obsessiveness is what makes some emotions like anger and rage bad. Whereas uh, disapproval, which is the other side of the coin, hey, that's you need that to sometimes navigate through this world. Anxiety about speech is not so swift, but concern, if you're concerned about speech, then when you have to give a speech, then you prepare and you get things done.
Hmm.
Jealousies are so exceedingly intense that they ruin all relationships. Whereas some jealousy just keeps the other dudes away from your woman. Okay, it's a degree the way you correctly uh,
Mm.
stated. It is that's where the dog is buried, and then there may be an instance where uh, uncontrolled anger and rage when you're about to save your child from some danger is functional.
Yeah, yeah, okay. And just going back a little bit, I'm just recalling here that the original question in relation to stuttering and recovery from stuttering, um, we were discussing what we considered to be a recovery from stuttering. Now, how does this tie in with our ability maybe to get a better level of control over our emotions?
Okay, that is, I take an individual. I start him on a Zoom session as this, and I ask him to often turn off his microphone. And in some instances where the stuttering is very severe, the video, and I say, talk for 30 seconds with everything off, then start to talk it with on.
Mm.
And what is happening is that when he doesn't think that I can and does not and knows that I can't hear him or see him,
Mm.
then he often is rather fluent, sometimes not totally, but rather. But when he erstwhile thinks that I'm here to judge him how he talks, he falls apart.
Mm.
And so that is what I'm stating is, on one hand, when talking to yourself in the mirror in the morning as you shave, you're able to talk quite well, and then you in an hour are talking to your supervisor, and you're all uptight. Your emotions screw you. That is, all of a sudden you can't talk.
Mm. Okay. And you are saying that a lot of that has to do with the speaker, the stutterer, presuming that the listener is judging them, or maybe it has to do with them judging themselves, or the two forms of judgment are connected with each other.
There's small variations, but that is the one thing is that some people say that they really need the approval of their supervisor's supervisor. Others think that it's dangerous. Their job may be gone if they don't talk well, no job, no money. And there, but the thing is, we have built our ideas, our emotions, and all of it in a very idiosyncratic way. And we got to be able to unravel that. So, for example, if I were you and there was really an individual who was not afraid of work, I'd say, read my book and then write your own book of what you interpret the work I had to go through in order to arrive where I was, where I am now.
Okay. And the people you see, you encourage them to look at their own life and how it's developed, and I presume. Is this what you're saying?
Well, the default position is to attempt to do it very efficiently, okay? Meaning that if you can write down and say, A is the activating event. A does not cause the consequent emotion and consequent stuttering. It is that the B, the evaluative belief about the activating event, is what causes our consequent emotion.
Okay.
Now, what do we do about it? Well, you dispute the belief. And some individuals are able to dispute it very well. And there's an online forum that we use on it, and it can be seen on my www.stutteringrecovery.net. And some individuals can go right through it and they get it. But those are usually the individuals who are involved in science. It's a kind of a scientific thinking. If you really believe that everything has to be evidence-based, these individuals can often just step into it and do it.
Yeah. Okay.
And others, you just have to attempt to talk them into doing things and various things to discover themselves, how their patterns of thinking are, and all of that, and not say this kind of thinking is wrong, meaning it's bad. You don't attach a value judgment. You just said it may not be getting what you want.
Okay. So it's becoming more pragmatic and less idealistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see. I mean, listening to what you're saying here, I'm reminded of something that Wendell Johnson said once. That one of the biggest problems that people have, and you were talking about stutterers, but also people in general, is being able to differentiate between something that happens, like something that we do, and our value judgments about that thing.
Yeah.
Unless we're taught to differentiate in that way, we have a tendency to think that it's all one. Yeah, but actually, they're two separate things. Yeah, you have your performance, but then you have your value judgments about that performance.
Yeah.
And certainly myself, I'm certainly in the same camp as Wendell Johnson there, of thinking, well, really the problems are with the value judgments rather than with the performance.
Yes. I'm a fan of Wendell Johnson's and Korzybski.
Korzybski, yes. So the general semantics.
General semantics, yes.
Yeah.
So the funny aspect, this is just an aside, and it will drive some people up the walls, but whenever somebody uses PWS,
Yes.
it is just as much a label as stutterer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there is when what the general semantics advocates is that cow number one is not equal to cow number two.
Mm.
We are not stutterers. We're neither butchers, bakers, nor candlestick makers. We are people who sometimes, under some circumstances, talk in a way which some other people call stuttering or stammering.
Mm-hmm.
We're not, when you start to label people, you get in all kinds of difficulties, I think.
Well, if you believe the labels, I mean, one of the thoughts that I have about this is we have to go beyond the labels, and I think we have to learn to perceive more directly, rather because what seems to happen with us as we grow up is our brains get completely overtaken by words.
Yeah,
And when our brains get like that, we somehow get out of touch with the reality that lies behind those words. And I suspect for many of us, that happens, and we never manage to get back to being able to see through the words and see what lies behind them. For me, I took a somewhat different route. My interest was more in mindfulness and in meditation, but it fundamentally seemed to be the same process that Wendell Johnson was talking about when I've read his work on general semantics. And so for me, it's fine to use labels as long as we don't get carried away by the things.
yeah,
So stutterer is a label. Person who stutters is a label. All of the words are labels. They're all oversimplifications of reality, and that's fine as long as we remember that, I think.
yeah.
Um,
Now,
and yeah,
it's the whole tape is starting to become long, and we have to, for this session, we have to somehow wind it down. And one of the ways of winding it down is that even though I think that what I think is of value, I'm not an individual who is a true believer who thinks that it's the only way. I think it's a very good way, and that is how I handle things. But I'm not a fanatic about stuff.
Mm.
And the thing is there are things that we will, I hopefully we talk again, and that we will talk about the other aspects that are a little bit finer, meditation and all of that is where we can talk about what kind of effect it may have, and talk about what else can we do.
Okay, great. I'm guessing the trick here will be to do some editing later, and to cut out the bits of importance and stick them together if you want to make it into something that is going to be short and concise. Or otherwise, we could have more talks in the future. It's been great fun talking to you. It's the first time we've had a proper conversation, really. So that's been a good experience.
Now, it's often it also happens if each of us is in the kind of a space. Sometimes you get together and one individual is in the right space and the other one is in another space, and it's not easy to talk about. So the way I understand it, you want to have the of O-tape 4-page summary like the Attorney General has of the of Mueller's 400-page the dissertation. You know what I'm talking about?
No, I'm lost there, I'm afraid.
Okay. In United States, we had an investigation of whether Russians influenced our election.
Oh, right. Yes, sure. Okay. And it was 400 pages long.
400 pages long.
Right.
And the Attorney General wrote up 4 pages on it and said, this is it. So you sometimes cannot put 400 pages into 4 pages. But
sure.
I'm just attempting to be funny. Sometimes it comes across all right. Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, it's so that's always the issue. So I guess for tonight, maybe we should call it a day.
Yeah.
It's nighttime over here. I guess it's daytime with you, but and we should talk again. It should be good.
Yeah, it was very enjoyable. I liked it.
Great. Yes, me too. Me too. Okay, so you are a Facebook friend already. I see that, but I've got your email now too, and you've got my email.
Yeah.
So yeah. Let me know.
Yeah. At the moment, I'm a bit tired because it was an exhausting talk. Actually, it was all of it was not easy on my part. You know, that is, you may have enjoyed it more, or were more at ease with it. I had to sometimes think of it to put the words in the right order, but it was enjoyable.
Yeah, and useful too, I think. I mean, I'm one of the things I should say, actually, part of, if it's not already come over, part of my reason for writing, what I've been writing over the last couple of years, has been to try and make sense out of my story, not just for other people, but to a large extent, I've been writing it for myself. Yeah, because I think the journey never really ends. I mean, I don't really have an issue with stuttering anymore, but life has its issues that continue on, and yeah, not sure exactly where I'm going with that, but what I did notice that you were talking also about when you see your clients, it sounded like you tried to also get them to look at their lives, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of conscious that it would maybe be good for all of us to write our biographies, really.
Well, that is what Socrates said, that unexamined life is not worth living. And to that I answered that unlived life is not worth examining.
Well, I'm trying to both live and examine, so maybe I'm one of the lucky ones there. Okay, good. Well, shall we leave it there anyway?
Yeah.
And
we'll get in contact with each other. At the moment, I don't want to think about when to do it because I'm a bit tired.
Okay, fine, super. So at some point in the future.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, it was nice talking to you.
I hope within a week or so, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And then we can choose what topic to talk about. It doesn't have to be stuttering.
Yeah. Yes. My difficulty is I wander. Yeah. I get enthusiastic about something, and then before I know it, we're talking about something different, and so you'll have to get accustomed to that when you talk to me. You'll have to keep pulling me back.
This is what I mean really by recovering from stuttering. Stuttering is no longer the main concern of my life.
Yeah, yes. Well, that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah.
Okay, then.
Okay, right.
See
Bye.
you. Okay, bye.